Hey there, Cam here from Training Talk. Welcome to this week's episode of Endurance Coaching Business. I'm not really talking about endurance coaching business today. I suppose I am a little bit, but I've just got back from a bit of time away in Mexico. Had a great time, thought a lot about stuff. So I just wanted to share some of my thoughts. It's a little bit self-indulgent, to be honest, but maybe it might help someone. Yeah, I've been doing Training Talk for 10 years now, and I probably never thought that I would get this far with it. But recently I've been struggling a bit just because I feel like I haven't made progress maybe in the short term, even though I've come so far. So just trying to balance that out and seeing what sort of things I can do to get more performance out of myself to take things further. So without being too dramatic or anything, just trying to, make the most of what I've got and put the most that I can into the business to try and make it grow a little bit faster than it has been. So I've been thinking about this framework around weaknesses, strengths, weaknesses, and blind spots. So I'm calling this weaknesses are not your weakness. So I guess I've always thought my weaknesses were what held me back, and that really makes sense. And if I could just fix those areas, be more consistent, for example, in the business with marketing, get better social engagement, be more proactive with outreach, and then everything else would just click into place, because those are the things that I'm not very good at. But lately, I think I'm starting to realize something slightly different, and that my weaknesses aren't actually the problem. It's the things that I don't even realize I'm doing or not doing, probably in most cases, that get in the way of growth in a business perspective, but I guess like in general life as well. So the idea of, I can't remember where I got this idea from. I didn't make it up myself. Maybe I've heard it in multiple places, but this idea of strengths, weaknesses, and blind spots feels like a little bit more of a useful lens to think about how my own work at Training Talk, but also how coaches can think about growing their own businesses too. So let's sort of dive into it. Strengths, so that's an easy one, really, but sometimes we forget about our strengths. So I guess for me as a software developer, my natural tendency is to build software, systemize stuff, solve problems, and I can easily lose hours in the flow of building something new. And that's really my comfort zone. That's my strength. But I've learned that these strengths can often become invisible because they feel easy. So we don't always value the things that naturally come to us as much as we should. So for me, being analytical and thoughtful is sort of second nature, but that same trait can make me overthink decisions as well, and sometimes delay action because I'm overthinking things, what could go wrong with things, all of the problems with things, etc. So, but maybe for endurance coaches, that's a little bit different. So maybe strengths often looks like parts of the coaching that feels effortless. So, connecting with athletes, building training plans, motivating people, those are probably some of your superpowers as a coach. So I guess it's good to recognize them as such and intentionally build your business around them instead of chasing every new thing that you think you should be doing. So when we build from our strength, growth, I guess, feels lighter and not as forced as when you are trying to focus on things that you're not so good at. All right, so that's strengths. Weaknesses, so this is like the manageable stuff. So these are the things that we already know we're not great at. So for me, that's like social interaction. Now, I can communicate okay when I need to, but it does take a lot of energy from me. So I often avoid too much social interaction, particularly with work. So even if deep down I know that making those connections as people is valuable and lots of insights come from them and lots of good relationships, etc. And, we all know the power of relationships, especially over time. So that's a weakness for me, but it's a known one. So that means that I can sort of design around it. I can schedule time when I When I force myself to do that interpersonal engagement with either customers or colleagues or maybe partners, and then if I schedule that time, I can schedule it when I've got the most energy. I can automate a few things around it, build systems that can keep me connected without draining me too much, etc. So for coaches, maybe it's something different again. So it might be something like marketing. Some coaches know they're not doing enough of it, but they're aware that it's a weakness of theirs, and that's okay. Awareness means you can plan around it. You can batch content, for example, schedule your social posts, or use tools that make marketing just a little bit easier, automated, simplified, etc. And then you can stay visible in the market as a coach without burning out on those things that maybe you don't enjoy so much. So a weakness is just a design challenge. It's not a personal flaw. So that's great. Strengths we know about, our weaknesses we know about, we can work around those. But this is, I think, the most important thing that I've come to start thinking about, and that's blind spots. So these are different than weaknesses. They're a pattern that we don't see in ourselves, habits we don't realize we've got, reactions we don't notice, or assumptions that we have that hold us back because we're not even aware that we're making these assumptions. So for me, this is something I'm sort of only beginning to consider now. After more than 10 years of building Training Talk, I've sometimes felt stuck, and I'm starting to understand more about myself, partly because, of so much experience, partly because of age, partly because of all the time that I've spent doing the same thing. So I'm just starting to find my feet around this idea of blind spots. So I don't know what my blind spots are, obviously, but you can start to figure them out and make them your weaknesses maybe. And then once they're your weaknesses, you can plan around them. So, for example, like how when someone challenges me on something that I built for Training Talk maybe, or suggests an idea that contradicts my current assumptions, that's when you feel defensive, and it's an almost automatic feeling, and you feel a resistance, rise inside you. Maybe it's anxiety, or maybe even discomfort, or maybe even anger, and that sort of rises up in you without even thinking about it. And that defensiveness, I think, might be a clue that could be a blind spot. Not definitely, but it could be. And I think that's a good sign. So, maybe I'm too attached to certain ways of thinking, or maybe I've tied my identity to the things that I've created or the ideas that I have. So it feels like someone could be like attacking your identity or something just by suggesting different alternatives. So maybe for coaches, blind spots should show up all the time too. One of the biggest ones I've seen, and you would have heard me say this before, is again around marketing. So some coaches genuinely believe that marketing is bad, that promoting themselves is somehow cheapens the authenticity of their coaching. They say things like, "Oh, my results sell themselves," etc. But that's definitely a blind spot, not a weakness, because in reality, marketing is communication. Coaches are good at communication. It's how any business reaches their customers and communicates to them that your service is for them, that both people can benefit from that service, etc. And the reality of it is that zero businesses, coaching or otherwise, thrive long-term without focusing on marketing. So blind spots are sneaky because they hide behind the stories we tell ourselves that feel true. These stories we tell ourselves, they feel true. We don't know that they're stories that we're telling ourselves, and that's why they're blind spots. So it's good to think about what stories might you be telling yourself, and are they really true? This is a very difficult thing to do. So how might we start seeing our blind spots? Well, how might I start seeing my blind spots? Maybe the only way to deal with blind spots is to look for them very gently, very curiously, but gently. So, I need to start paying more attention to when I feel that resistance, like that I mentioned before. If someone gives feedback and my first instinct is to explain or defend, then I should pause and ask, why does this bother me so much? If they're wrong, it shouldn't bother me. So if it bothers me, maybe there is some truth in what they're saying. It might not be true. My reactions might be right, but they're definitely worth examining. So blind spots don't disappear just because we work harder. They fade, I think, when we become more curious about them. So maybe growth, both personal and professional, is just a process of self-awareness rather than self-correction. So instead of correcting your weaknesses, being more aware of what your blind spots are, so then you can determine that they're weaknesses and then start to work around them. So strengths are where you should double down. Weaknesses are where you should design systems around them. Blind spots where you should calmly and curiously look closer at things. So the goal is not to be perfect. It's to see yourself clearly enough to make intentional choices. So for coaches, that might mean building your business around your strengths as a communicator or a motivator. You're all good at that. And using tools to manage your admin weaknesses maybe. And then just staying open to seeing your blind spots, the things that might be holding you back from real growth that you aren't currently aware of. So for me, that just means looking at where I get defensive, where I avoid connection and conflict maybe, and where I can just trust others more in the process of building the business. So it's not about fixing ourselves at all. Maybe it's more about learning to see ourselves more clearly and more fully. So not sure if that was useful or not, but it was actually good for me to go through it. It's good I have had this all in my head, and to write it down, help with the help of AI to organize my thoughts around this and put it on paper, and then to actually record it has even been useful. So thanks for listening if you got this far, and don't forget, Training Talk all-in-one endurance coaching platform. So, if you want a little bit more out of your coaching platform, that you can control a little bit more, the branding, etc., what your athletes see and don't see, the complexity around it, we're very configurable, and we'd love to show you what we've got. So reach out anytime. All right, cheers, bye.